Help me, please help me.
I will confess.
Emeka clutched his stomach as a sharp, violent pain twisted through him. He screamed, tearing through the house as he stumbled backward, knocking into the table where a plate of half-eaten food lay abandoned, the spoon clattering to the floor. His body trembled uncontrollably, sweat pouring down his face as he gasped for air, confusion and terror filling his eyes. And just then, the front door burst open as Mrs. Ugochi rushed in, her handbag slipping from her shoulder and crashing to the ground as her gaze landed on him, frozen for a split second in pure shock before horror consumed her face. The room felt suddenly suffocating, heavy with something unseen yet deadly. As Emeka writhed in agony on the floor, his cries growing weaker with each passing second, and in that moment, a chilling truth hung silently in the air. She cooked the meal with love, or so he thought, but what she hid inside it would destroy everything she ever lived for. Chief Uche was a man many people respected, a man whose name carried weight wherever it was spoken, a man who had wealth, honor, and a house that never lacked anything. Yet behind his calm face lived a quiet sorrow that never seemed to leave him. Ever since his first wife died under a mystery no one could explain, his life had changed, and though people whispered and wondered, he never spoke of it. He only carried the pain in silence while raising the little boy she left behind, a fragile 3-month-old baby named Ebuka, who would often cry in the night, as if he too felt the absence of the mother he never truly knew. And many nights, Chief Uche would sit beside the child, staring into the darkness, whispering softly, "My son, it is just you and me now. I will not fail you." Yet, even as he said those words, his voice carried doubt, because deep inside, he knew a child needed more than a grieving father. Time passed slowly, and loneliness settled heavily in the house, until one day, Mrs. Ugochi came into his life, a woman whose presence felt like warmth after a long, cold night. Her voice was gentle, her smile was comforting, and her kindness seemed real. When she saw the little boy, she bent down and carried him with care, saying softly, "This child deserves love. I can give him that." And Chief Uche, tired of grief and longing for peace, looked at her and asked quietly, "Can you truly love him as your own?" And without hesitation, she replied, "A child is a child. Love does not ask where he comes from." Those words touched something broken inside him, and before long, she became his wife and stepped fully into the home, taking the role of a mother. And not long after, she gave birth to her own son, Emeka, and the house that once felt empty slowly came alive again with the sounds of children growing. Ebuka and Emeka were raised side by side, eating from the same plate, running through the same yard, laughing over simple things. And when one cried, the other would sit close and say, "Do not cry, I am here." And if anyone tried to trouble one of them, the other would step forward boldly, saying, "If you touch him, you touch me." They slept in the same room, shared secrets in whispers at night, and dreamed together of the future. Their bond was pure and untouched by the things that often divide people. There was no jealousy, no rivalry, just a simple and honest love that only children understand. And many who saw them would smile and say, "These two are not just brothers, they are one heart." But while the boys saw each other that way, while they held on to each other with innocent trust, there was a silence in the house that watched them closely. A silence that did not speak, yet felt everything. As the boys grew older, there came a day when Chief Uche sat quietly in the evening, watching them play, and he sighed deeply before calling them closer, his voice calm but thoughtful as he said, "My sons, the time has come for you to begin your future. I want both of you to go to school and become great men." The boys looked at each other with excitement, their faces lighting up. But before the moment could settle, Mrs. Ugochi, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward gently and sat beside his husband, placing her hand softly on his arm as she spoke in a calm and careful tone. "My husband, your heart is good, but we must also be wise." She paused, glancing briefly at Ebuka before continuing. "Not every child is meant for books. Some are better with their hands. Some learn faster in the market than in the classroom." Chifuche frowned slightly and asked, "What are you trying to say?" And she replied softly, "I have watched Ebuka closely. He is strong, hardworking, but he struggles to sit still and read. Forcing him into school may only frustrate him, but if he learns a trade, he will shine." There was a silence, heavy and uncertain, and then Chifuche looked at Ebuka and asked gently, "My son, what do you think?" Ebuka smiled simply and said, "Father, whatever you choose for me is good. I only want to make you proud." Emeka quickly added, "We will both succeed no matter where we go." And Mrs. Ugochi smiled faintly, her eyes hiding something deeper as she said, "You see, they understand." And so it was decided. Emeka was sent to school, dressed neatly each morning with books in his hands, while Ebuka was taken to learn the spare parts business under a master who was known for discipline. And on the first day they parted ways, Emeka held Ebuka's hand tightly and said, "Do not forget me." And Ebuka laughed softly, replying, "How can I forget my own brother?" And they both walked away, smiling, each stepping into a different path without fear, still holding on to their bond. Time passed, and 5 years went by like a quiet wind. Ebuka woke early each day, worked tirelessly, carried heavy loads, learned quickly, and obeyed his master with respect. And one day, his master called him aside and said, "You have done well. You are ready to stand on your own." And not long after, Ebuka opened his own shop, bought his own car, and stood proudly as a young man who had built something with his hands, while Emeka also completed his schooling, returning home with certificates and hope in his eyes. But days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and the job he hoped for did not come. Each morning he dressed well and stepped out, and each evening he returned with a quiet face. And one night he sat beside his mother and said softly, "Mother, I have done everything right. Why is nothing working?" And she looked at him, forcing a smile as she replied, "Do not worry, your time will come." But inside her heart, something had begun to change, because each time she saw Ebuka's success, each time she heard people praise him, a silent comparison grew. And though she said nothing, her thoughts whispered in the dark, heavy with a frustration she could no longer ignore. As the days grew heavier, Mrs. Ugochi began to sit alone more often, her thoughts speaking louder than any voice around her. And one evening, as she watched Emeka return home with tired steps and empty hands, she called him softly and asked, "My son, did you find anything today?" And Emeka shook his head slowly, forcing a weak smile as he replied, "No, mother, but I will try again tomorrow." And as he walked away, she remained seated, staring into nothing as her heart whispered painfully, "My son went to school. Why is he suffering like this?" Her eyes slowly shifted toward the direction of Ebuka's shop, and her thoughts grew darker. And Ebuka, he is becoming too successful. She clenched her hands tightly, her voice barely a whisper. Was this not meant for my own son? From that moment, something inside her began to change. The warmth she once showed Ebuka slowly turned cold, and though she still spoke kindly on the outside, her heart had already begun to push him away, until one quiet day, she made a decision she could not take back, a decision that came not from reason, but from bitterness. Early that morning, she entered the kitchen and began to prepare a rich and delicious meal, the aroma filling the house. Her movements calm, almost too calm, as she stirred the pot slowly. Then she paused, looked around carefully, and brought out something small and hidden, her hand trembling slightly as she held it, and in a low voice she said to herself, "This will end it. My son must not live in another man's shadow." And with that, she added the poison quietly into the food, stirring it in until nothing could be seen, only the smell of a perfect meal remained. She placed it neatly on the table and covered it, her face unreadable, her heart beating slowly but heavily. Later that day, Ebuka and Emeka stepped out together, laughing as they walked, speaking of simple things. And after some time, Emeka placed his hand on his stomach and said, "I am hungry. I will go back home and eat." And Ebuka smiled, replying, "Go ahead. I will wait here for you." Emeka nodded and hurried home. And as he entered the house, his eyes fell on the table. He lifted the cover and his face lit up with joy. "Mother has cooked," he said happily, sitting down without a second thought, trusting completely. And as he ate, he smiled, enjoying every bite, unaware of what lay within it. But moments later, his smile faded. His hand slowly moved to his stomach as a sharp pain began to rise. "Ah, what is this?" he muttered, the pain growing stronger, twisting inside him violently. He stood up suddenly, knocking the chair aside as his body trembled. "Mother!" he cried out, his voice filled with fear. The pain became unbearable and he fell to the ground, screaming as his body writhed in agony. Just then, the door opened and Mrs. Ugochi stepped in, her face calm at first. But the moment her eyes landed on him, everything changed. Her bag slipped from her hand as she rushed forward, her voice shaking. "Emeka, what is happening?" But as she saw the plate, the half-eaten food, and the truth settled before her eyes, she froze completely, her lips trembling as the realization struck her like a blow. And in a broken whisper, she said, "No, no, this cannot be." But it was already too late, because the poison she had prepared in silence had found its way into the life she loved the most. Mrs. Ugochi fell to her knees beside Emeka, her hands shaking as she tried to lift his head, her voice breaking as she cried, my son, what is happening to you?" But Emeka could barely respond, his body twisting in pain, his breath coming in short, broken gasps as he clutched her arm tightly and whispered, "Mother, it hurts. Something is burning inside me." His eyes filled with fear and confusion, searching for her face for answers she could not give. And she began to wail uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face as she repeated over and over, "No, no, this is not meant for you. This is not meant for you." Her voice growing louder with panic, her heart tearing apart under the weight of what she had done. Just then, the door opened and Ebuka stepped inside, calling out casually, "Emeka, are you done eating?" But his voice faded the moment he saw the scene before him. His smile disappeared, replaced by shock as he rushed forward. "What is happening?" he asked, his eyes wide with confusion, kneeling beside them as he looked from Emeka's struggling body to Mrs. Ugochi's broken face. "Mother, what is wrong with him?" he demanded, his voice trembling. But she could not answer at first. She only shook her head, her tears falling without control, until finally she looked up at him, her eyes filled with guilt and fear, and in a weak, trembling voice she said, "It was not meant for him. It was meant for you." The words hung in the air like a heavy stone, and Ebuka froze, his mind struggling to understand. "What do you mean?" he asked slowly, his voice low and unsteady. And she covered her face with her hands, crying deeply as she spoke. "I did it. I put it in the food. I wanted to stop you. I was afraid. I was angry. I could not bear to see you rise while my own son suffered." Her voice broke as she continued. "I thought if you were gone, everything would be right again. I did not know he would eat it." Ebuka stepped back slowly, the pain in his eyes deeper than words. "You wanted me dead?" he whispered, disbelief and hurt mixing in his voice, while Emeka, still struggling for breath, reached weakly toward them and said faintly, "Mother, why?" And that question shattered whatever strength she had left. She leaned over him, crying loudly, forgive me, my son. I have destroyed everything." But the truth had already done its damage. The betrayal was complete, the regret too late. And as Emeka's grip slowly loosened, the room fell into a silence that could never be undone, a silence filled with loss that no words could ever heal. The day Emeka was buried was a day filled with heavy silence, the kind that sits on the chest and refuses to move. People gathered slowly, their faces dark with sorrow, their voices low as they whispered amongst themselves. How did this happen? What kind of mother does such a thing? And in the middle of it all lay the young boy, still and quiet, as though he had only fallen into a deep sleep, but everyone knew he would never wake again. Mrs. Ugochi was held by two women as she cried without control, her voice broken as she called out, "My son, please come back to me. I did not mean this. I did not mean this." But her cries only deepened the pain in the hearts of those who heard her, because they knew the truth could not be undone. Chief Uche stood not far from the grave, his body still, his eyes empty, as though something inside him had completely shut down. A man who once spoke with strength now said nothing. And when one elder walked up to him and said gently, "Be strong," he only replied in a faint voice, "I have no strength left," and turned away, unable to face the sight before him. As the soil began to cover the body, a deep cry rose from the crowd, some out of sorrow, some out of anger, and soon the murmurs grew louder. This must not be unpunished. Such evil cannot remain among us. And the elders gathered together, their faces stern as they spoke in low tones. And after a while, one of them stepped forward and said clearly, "Mrs. Ugochi, you have brought death into your own home with your own hands. Your actions have destroyed a life and broken a family. This land cannot carry such a burden." She fell to the ground, shaking her head as she begged, "Please, do not send me away. I have lost everything already." But the elder replied firmly, "There are some wrongs that tears cannot wash away." And the judgment was passed. She was to leave and never return. And as she was led away, her cries echoed behind her, fading slowly into the distance, leaving only silence in their place. Chief Uche did not follow her. He did not call her name. He only stood where he was, like a man turned to stone, while Ebuka remained behind after everyone had gone, standing alone beside the fresh grave, his eyes fixed on the earth that now covered his brother, his voice low as he spoke softly. "We were supposed to grow old together. You said we would never leave each other." The wind moved gently around him, but there was no answer, only the quiet truth of what had been lost. And in that still moment, a voice seemed to rise within the silence, clear and heavy. The poison she prepared for another became the end of her own blood. And so the story remained, a reminder carried from one heart to another, that jealousy destroys, and that evil intentions, no matter how hidden, often find their way back to the one who sends them.